This is Session 2 of Primer 4, which is an Introduction to Climate Change and Green Growth. The objectives of this session are to present an overview of the important concepts in the primer, to introduce climate change and its impact on development, and to describe green growth, which is a way to achieve a balanced and prosperous future. Now, let us proceed to the key concepts. What is weather? You will know it with such descriptions as rainy, sunny, windy, snowing, hot or cold, and dry or humid. Meteorologists would say that it is the state of the atmosphere at a given time and for a given place. They would describe it with variables such as temperature, humidity, air pressure, precipitation, and wind speed. On the other hand, what is climate? Unlike weather, which can actually be experienced, climate is a description of the average weather conditions for 30 years over a given place. This map is Figure 1 in Primer 4. The different colors are the different types of climates found in Asia. Table 1 in the primer summarizes the major climate categories such as tropical humid, dry, mild mid-latitude, severe mid-latitude, polar, and highland. I come from the Philippines, which has a tropical humid climate. We like to joke that we have only 2 seasons, wet and wetter. This next slide shows camels talking in the desert. They feel that they have only 1 season, the dry season. Some countries, like China, Russia, and India, can in fact have different climate zones where conditions may vary from zone to zone. Now let us turn to climate variability. It is possible for the parameters of a climate, such as temperature, precipitation, and humidity, to vary within this 30-year average. The graph shows the fluctuating annual rainfall of Sri Lanka that it received from the period 1880 to 2000. The average of 1,861 millimeters is shown as the zero line in the middle of the graph. There are years when the country received more than 600 millimeters above the average, or over 2,400 millimeters. There are also years when the country received about 400 millimeters less, or about 1,460 millimeters only. That means within the average climate, there is a big range that the rainfall can vary from 1,500 millimeters to as much as 2,400 millimeters. Now, climate change is a different concept. What it means is that we have to look at the climate's characteristics for decades and analyze the trends. Just because today is hotter or colder than anyone you know can ever remember in their lives, it does not mean that climate change is happening. Just because a monsoon started earlier or later does not mean that climate change is happening. Those are individual phenomena. Climatologists look at the big picture to determine if it is indeed changing. Now, if the climate is changing, then we must adapt to its impacts, mitigate the problem by reducing the amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere, and pursue green growth in order to do all these and increase sustainability of development. Now, I would like to introduce the concept of climate change adaptation. Climate change adaptation means we must modify behavior in order to reduce the vulnerability of natural and human systems against actual or perceived climate change effects. Who should be involved in this adaptation? Governments, communities, and organizations. We can all analyze the possible impacts, then make plans on how to adapt and implement these plans. In so doing, we can become resilient, which is to say our essential basic structures and functions can be preserved or restored or improved upon in spite of the oncoming changes in climate. Climate change is expected to have impacts, both positive but also negative. And the negative ones include the following. More people are projected to experience floods every year. This is due to sea level rise, especially those living in densely populated and low-lying areas. On the other hand, decreasing snowpack and shrinking glaciers may reduce fresh water and hydropower. Illness and death due to diarrhea may increase as the frequency of floods and droughts increase. In addition, climate change is expected to affect the frequency and severity of disaster events. The figure shows how climate change will affect disaster risk in 3 ways. First, it may affect the frequency and severity of hazards such as flood, landslides, storm surge, and drought. Second, it can weaken people by reducing livelihood options, degrading the environment, and increasing the chance for illness. Third, new areas may be exposed to hazards as sea levels rise and encroach on lowlands, or as people settle on floodplains and slopes and expose themselves to floods and landslides. Now let us turn to climate change mitigation, which is tackling the problem at its source. Greenhouse gases are emitted by human activities such as driving vehicles, manufacturing, burning wood and coal. The presence of too much greenhouse gases is thought to increase the amount of solar energy trapped around the Earth, and thus warms the lands and seas. We now want to remove these greenhouse gases as much as possible. Why is it important to address climate change? It is because we need to change our practices that began since the European Industrial Revolution, when human societies have been burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Collectively, these contain so much molecules of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and ozone that they have remained in the atmosphere and take too long to be broken down. We also need to stop cutting down forests and fields because they help us remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis. We therefore need to target our methods employed in the main sectors that affect the amount of greenhouse gas emitted, specifically agriculture, manufacturing, energy, and logging. We also need to promote a more responsible and sustainable way to development, where we emit less greenhouse gases, are more resilient to climate changes, and we have more responsible lives towards our environment. This brings us to the last major concept, which is called green growth. What is green growth? It is a way to pursue economic growth and development that reminds us to protect the environment and think of sustainability. We should look at our non-polluting processes and strive for balance in our use of land, oil, food, natural resources, and energy. The Asia-Pacific region has to sit up and take notice. And you as students must also think of a future that does not center around a career, but about balance and harmony. The picture is grim for the Asia-Pacific if we do not change our ways. By the start of the 21st century, we have used 35 billion tons, or 60% of material consumed globally. We use 3 times the resources that the rest of the world needs to produce 1 unit of economic growth. We use energy faster. We increased our greenhouse gas emissions by 5 billion in 15 years. We have used 2.4 billion cubic meters of water in agriculture, manufacturing, and household consumption by 2000. We have an average water use of 644 cubic meters per person. North and Central Asia are the largest water users at 1,000 cubic meters per person. Therefore, if we must summarize the challenges of the future and the reason for this primer, it is that our resources are becoming limited. Climate change threatens to undermine our way of living, and we are wasteful of the bounty that ecology brings us. The time has come to think of how to close this gap between our economic wants and ecological balance. The rest of the primer talks about how ICTs may contribute to this need in this time of our history.